This is Mike Butler with Bisbee Live. I am re-releasing my interview with Gene Caffeine, who came through Bisbee last year when I was still with the radio station. And this was actually recorded at the radio station, KBRP. She is coming back to promote her new EP, Love, What Is It? So she'll be here in Bisbee on December 15th at the Bisbee Grand around 2 to 5 p.m. This information is going to be available at bisbeelive.com, along with a link to her new EP. You can find more about Jean by just putting her name in an internet search, Jean, Caffeine, and she's also on Bandcamp. You'll find that link on bisbeelive.com, along with more information about her upcoming concert here in Bisbee, December 15th at the Bisbee Grand. So here is my interview from 2018 with Gene Caffeine. This is Bisbee Live with Mike Butler, a podcast featuring interviews with artists and musicians, really any creative types from Bisbee, Arizona, or artists visiting the area. You can sometimes hear snippets of these interviews on KBRP, the local community-supported radio station here in Bisbee. Things are shifting, however, and going forward, the interviews will be a separate entity recorded independently, separate from KBRP. This week, I'm releasing the podcast version of my interview with Gene Caffeine, who came to Bisbee a few weeks ago to play a gig promoting her new album, Sadie Saturday Night. Sadie Saturday Night is not only her latest album release, but also the name of her one-woman show about growing up in San Francisco during the explosion of punk rock in the late 70s. Be sure to check out SadieSaturdayNight.com. That's NITE.com, and also GeneCaffeine.com to find out more about her music and where you can go see her show. This interview was recorded in the KBRP studio a few weeks back in the Bisbee Royale building downtown. Have you been to Bisbee before?
I've been to Bisbee twice. Once, probably 20 years ago, I was playing at Club Congress and staying with
Tucson,
a friend.
right?
And yeah. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had a friend that had moved to Bisbee that I was completely out of touch with. I mean, it's before cell phones, and I don't know where email was in the picture. So I just drove there with this older friend of mine, and we drove around Bisbee asking if anybody knew my friend, Danny Plutzer.
Okay. And did you find anybody that
did know him?
Yeah.
And found him, and he looked a little bit perplexed that I showed up out of nowhere just to say hi. So that was the first time. And then I came and played the Quarry in the fall. It was on a Sunday, so it was a little quieter.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to play Saturday, but my booking guy had booked an impossibly long route that I couldn't handle.
And you know the expats here, is that right?
Say it again?
The expats?
Now I know them because Danny told me that they were a great band, and I reached out to them, and they played with me that Sunday night, and then we've done a couple small shows here during South by in Austin. Mm-hmm. And so I really know their material now. They've got the best songs. They're so catchy, they get in my head and stay there.
Well, I've been enjoying your latest album. We'll get into it, but
good. I hope that gets into your head and stays there too.
It has this past week.
Good.
So, Bisbee 20 years ago, if you remember, if you have any recollections of it, how much has it changed?
I can't speak to that. It was just like this crazy adventure, and we went to look for a Jewish cemetery, I think in Tombstone, before we got to Bisbee. So it was just sort of this afternoon. I didn't stay overnight in Bisbee. I just sort of tooled around. So I can speak to how other places have changed because it seems like any place where the population has changed.
Well, I want to get into that too, for sure, because I know that you grew up for the punk scene in San Francisco. You were there when it all exploded there, right?
Yeah.
And you watched it die. And in your song Winter of Hate, you kind of touch on the death of punk rock.
Right, which I guess didn't die. And that song sort of came out of a conversation with my collaborator, this guy Josh Robbins, who's like a big Dead Kennedys fan, and I was like, oh my God, I thought it was all over by the time the Dead Kennedys got in the picture. I was very wrong, since that's like really one of the main exports from San Francisco punk rock that everybody knows. But I was like, oh yeah, this is so over. Well, I did think there was some sort of death that happened at that show, but I guess I don't know. When you go to the hospital and you die for a few minutes and then you get revived.
Then you see the light.
Kind of like, maybe it was sort of like that, because it's really actually been punk rock seems to have really sustained and endured, and in some ways, I feel like this record gets a little more attention because punk rock has such a kind of a loyal base, both young and old. Even though a lot of the tracks on my album don't sound very punk rock, a couple do.
Well, I was listening back to All Night Truck Stop, Geckos in the Elevator, and I mean, you can have a twang to you for sure, and I love it. Like kind of like what X turned into, and what those guys end up doing.
I was definitely into the Knitters and
Yeah. Who is that?
A lot of punks went roots, and some punks, like my friend Penelope from the Adventures, also, like myself, went kind of folk. I mean, I sort of hate the F word, but I know I can have that sound. Some of it is just really like pragmatic, because it's hard to keep a band. It's hard to take a band on the road. Austin has so many players. Everybody's playing with, a million bands, and they're going to be loyal to the one that works the most and gets the most money. And for years, I was a teacher, and I couldn't take a full band on the road. I could barely play ever. So it started doing a lot of shows just as a duo, and it got, gets folky.
What did you teach?
I taught art
that's
in
great.
elementary school. I don't teach in elementary school anymore. I still do some. Now I've gone from being a school teacher to a teaching artist. So, so no benefits, but a lot less hours, and you can still be an artist.
And was that in Austin when you were teaching?
The lion's share of it was in Austin. I'd had one little year where I taught overseas in Thailand, and a couple years where I did the teaching artist thing in Canada, and in one other place. But most of it was in Austin. Lots and lots of years of teaching in Austin.
Yeah, and obviously Austin's a big music city. But what made you want to move away from San Francisco?
It was a process. I didn't really go from San Francisco to Austin. I went from San Francisco to New York because that had been my big dream. My parents were New Yorkers, so we'd go back there all the time. And I'm like, when I grow up, I'm gonna move to New York and be famous. Like so, like a 6-year-old's dream. So the moving to New York happened, and I had a lot of adventures there that have yet to be documented in an album, but I did a little bit. I worked in clubs, from coat check to DJ. I had a dream that I wanted to move to New York and be a DJ. It wasn't specific, like on the air or in clubs. So I ended up doing a little DJing in clubs, and then I had several bands, but one of them was very popular for a couple years and then gone.
So it goes.
That's how it goes. That band was called Pulsalama, and it was kind of formed as a joke or as a concept for a party at this place called Club 57, which has had a resurgence because the Museum of Modern Art somehow caught wind of Club 57, which was this phenomenon through the early to mid 80s, and they made like a retrospective in the basement. So from last, I don't know, October to April, they had this exhibit, and all these people from the past came out of the woodwork. So anyways, this band Paul Salama came out of the scene at Club 57, which was kind of had a different theme every night. And if you were in the crowd that hung out there, you could pitch your idea or, book the place for the night and do any kind of craziness. So this band, Paul Salama, came out of something that Ann Magnuson, who you may be familiar with, she was in Bong Water. She's an actress and a performance artist. If you do your research, a lot will come up on Ann. So this was Ann's project. She wanted to have this bacchanal with an all-female, like, percussion ensemble, like wearing togas and stuff. So somehow I got recruited to that the last minute. I moved to New York kind of recently and had briefly played in a Velvet Underground tribute band as a drummer. And,
oh, interesting.
And so Ann saw that, and I got recruited into this Paul Salama, which was just for this event, but it was so well received. Then we booked some club gigs, and they were well received, and ended up being something that happened for a couple of years. And we opened some shows for the Clash. And
you talk about that in All Girl Band, right?
I do. With All Girl Band, I had each verse is for like one of the girl bands that I play drums in. So it starts. So that's the only song that's not like totally true to the punk scene. Well, I did repurpose some other songs, so maybe that isn't even true.
Well, this whole new album of yours, Sadie Saturday Night, it really is a nostalgia album, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And in that song, All Girl Band, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you mention Bill Murray?
Yeah, I do mention Bill Murray.
Oh, I have to hear that story. What was he at a gig?
Well, I was told he was at a gig. We got booked to play at this place, the Hong Kong Cafe. There were these two rival Chinese restaurants that were hosting punk bands, and
this is
Hollywood,
in New York, right?
Around 79,
okay.
I think. And our friends, the Zeros, a band that was originally from San Diego, but I think by that point was living in San Francisco. They had some shows there, and they invited us to open. And one of the perks of, playing shows with restaurants is they feed you. So we ate a lot of the food, which is probably never a great idea before you play a gig, especially if it's like really greasy food. And I guess they thought we were horrible, the owner. And after our show, which was supposed to be one of two, she came up to me and she said, basically exactly what I say in the song: "You're the worst band we've ever heard, and Bill Murray just left." So I didn't see him, but I guess if you're gonna be insulted, you might as well go big. So
they really wanted to dig that knife as far in as possible.
Yeah, but it's a very funny insult. I mean, at the time, it was really horrible.
That's so funny.
I love Bill Murray, but and then it was really early, just like when I don't know if he'd even made Caddyshack, maybe, but it's like certainly pre Ghostbusters, Saturday Night Live type timeline. Bill Murray. So yeah, that was crushing. But the fun thing about making an album like this is that you can dredge up all that stuff, and a lot of it wasn't pleasant. That's the thing. Nostalgia is something that usually is sort of like shiny and shimmery and you long for. To me, it's kind of like enhanced, memory enhanced. But the album is, pretty positive. But I also have this show that I do, like a performance piece, and it leans more on the storytelling part of that same history, and it goes to some like darker or more personal places. But I tend to, make songs that sound pretty cheery these days, even if maybe that wasn't my experience.
Hey, well, it's a good time to have plenty of cheery songs,
Yeah,
I don't think you can have too many. And so on the album, we get a little bit of...
remember some good times.
Right.
To remember some good times.
There is some spoken word on the album, but you're saying you do a performance. Is it so you'll tell stories and then you'll play songs from the album?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the performance piece is like scripted storytelling. It's got some little riffs in it, and it's got sometimes it'll have the whole song like girl band, or sometimes it just has like a really shortened version of a song, or like a song like Sadie Saturday Night. In retrospect, it has 5 verses. That's too many verses, period. But I already recorded it like that. So in the play, I have to try to keep things to an hour if I can, or close to I had to do it at a Fringe Fest. They said it had to be an hour. So for them, I whittled down a bunch of the songs, but there's a lot of extra storytelling in it. Yeah. But last time I went on tour, somebody was supposed to go with me and accompany me on guitar, and kind of somewhat short notice, he got a better gig. So I was like, what am I going to do? So I started kind of making my set into a hybrid where I do some of the storytelling, some of the funnier stories that lead into the songs on the album. I've been kind of making a third thing where I mix it up with the stories and the songs. I don't know if I'll do that on Saturday night. It depends what the crowd is like. If the crowd is really partying, I'm just going to play songs. But when I played before there on Sunday, and it was a real intimate crowd of, Danny's friends and the expats' friends, then I told a lot of stories.
Right. That's what they wanted to hear. So
it gets people's attention, because it's not just like, oh my God, we have to listen to another person's songs for 45 minutes again. Sometimes you really want to listen to that person's songs for 45 minutes, but sometimes, you could feel a little antsy. It's a small crowd,
So this performance piece has been kind of like an evolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole thing was an evolution. I'm very... I get a lot of ideas, but I'm slow to execute the ideas. So it started as I wanted to write a memoir. But I don't know. Based on some very limited feedback I got, maybe the memoir wasn't very good. I don't know. I gave it to a very grouchy rock critic to read.
Well, that'll do it. I mean, you have to send some brownies along with it or something.
Yeah. There was some incentive, but he didn't have his kid gloves on. The memoir was very anecdotal. It wasn't full of plot points and drama and shit I don't even know about, But so it started with that, and then I went to a weekend writing workshop, and people were like, "This should be you should perform this." And I'm like, no. Because that sounded horrible to me, that you'd have to learn all this stuff and then just do it once. If you make an album, you go out and play it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
That sounded really like a lot of work. I was like, no. And then it just sort of kept percolating. And then I made myself sign up for this Fringe Fest, that like a mini Fringe, where you perform for 25 minutes. And again, I was supposed to have a guitar player, and he kept not coming through. So I was like, oh, I got to figure something out. And another friend suggested repurpose some of your songs. So I ended up writing some new ones and repurposing some old ones. And for the play, for this Fringe Fest, I had wanted to use all these samples. Originally, when I wrote the memoir, it had all these little shout outs to all kinds of songs. Kind of like, I don't know, there's a little novel called Something About a Mixtape. It's a guy who writes for Rolling Stone. It's a real neat little memoir, and I think he organizes everything by songs he likes. So I had done that, and they were like, you can only have 5 sound cues. I was like, 5 sound cues? So that sort of long, that sparked me to write some songs. I tend to not tell a story very concisely. You really may have to chop this up.
Oh, no. It makes perfect sense, and it makes sense that you would do it on stage. I mean, you've been performing,
and I did it on stage
so long.
before I made the album, and then after I made the album, I think I did it on stage again. But I don't have a producer, I don't have a director, I don't have a background in theater, so I think when you do theater, you get grants, and I got one little grant to do it in the city. I just haven't really had the nerve or the oomph or the something to try to see how I could do that on a national level. Maybe the moment's passed. Maybe it hasn't.
No.
Oh, yeah. When I first was picking Danny's brain to come to Bisbee, I was like, well, I can do this theater piece, or I could play a gig. But I think when you do the theater piece, you got to rent the theater. And so if no one knows who you are, that's not unless you have grant money, that's just not very doable.
Yeah. Yep.
But I like to do the piece, but the piece is intense, and playing a gig is light and fluffy,
Right. And you'll have the album for sale on vinyl, right?
Yeah, I have it on vinyl, and I have a few copies on CD.
Is this your first release on vinyl since it's kind of made a comeback?
It's my first release on vinyl ever. But I mean, it's an album about the 70s. So I didn't even want to do a CD. It's good I did, because I couldn't have it would be hard. Sending it to radio would have been hard, and tons of people still don't have turntables. I mean, there's like young people who are into vinyl, and then there's like old curmudgeons like myself who have, held on to, turntables, or, or held on to some of their albums. I've lost quite a few. It's my husband, who's younger, turns out to like really be the vinyl junkie these days.
Okay. He has a pretty good collection.
He just like always wants to go to the record store. And I was that person. I mean, for so long, I was that person. I don't know why I'm not that person right now. Maybe because I've had to haul those albums so many times.
That's why I've lost all my albums. Yeah.
Oh,
I've
moving
lost so much.
Most of my albums. And things get confusing. Like I moved to Canada and lent some albums and a turntable to a friend who I love, but he never listened to them, and he never got a turntable, but he doesn't want to give them back. Right? he remembers them as a gift. I really don't think there's any malice to it. I truly think he remembers it as a gift. People remember things differently. And now he got married. I went to visit him. I'm like, hey, if you don't have the setup, I'll take those albums back. And she was like, well, we might listen to them sometime. I'm thinking, it's been 10 years. You don't have a turntable set up, and you just have a kid. You're not going to listen to these albums.
They're just collecting dust, yep.
So I want them back. But he was such a nice guy. He helped me in so many other ways. I feel so small to want the albums back. So I really think that's why I've kind of lost my attachment to vinyl. I always loved vinyl, and I took vinyl from, New York to Austin. And in many times I took some in the car, and then I'd come back and get some on plane. I mean, I've done this so many times. And like you say, there's a lot of attrition. So I think I have a different relationship to the albums from so many moves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm messy. I would scratch them up and not take care of them as much as I love them. And MP3s and MP4s are stupid and don't sound very good. But if you're a disorganized person, you can't be disorganized with them. They're inherently organized.
It's easier in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but they sound crappy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they're all about making Apple 50 cents.
Right. I'm still a supporter of CDs. In terms of digital, it's hard to beat that quality.
Yeah.
And you still get the artwork, it's something tangible in your hand. That's what's so great about the LPs,
And they don't warp in your car.
Right. Yep. But they do have a shelf life. I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think vinyl records will last longer if you take care of them than a CD, which does slowly deteriorate. Yeah.
Yeah. Albums were great. I just got tired of carrying them everywhere.
Right.
Well, I used to be a DJ in the clubs sometimes. And at the time I was a DJ, I lived up 5 flights of stairs, and they called the first floor not the ground floor. So it's really 6. And so, I'd have these 2 milk crates, and I'd go up, half a flight with one and then come back down and do the other half. So I have this different relationship to LPs, even though I love them. But yeah, the LPs equals magic plus hauling.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's quite a workout just hauling them around.
I liked when you had to work to get your LPs when I first got LPs, and I would just look at all these really sort of crumbling, chaotic bookstores in San Francisco that would have a little album section, or these cool kind of what we would consider classic rocky record stores. I mean, I like the hunt and the chase.
Well, it's still like that to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
Or at least for those classic ones, the old, that aren't re-releases.
Right.
Yeah.
I think in a smaller place too, you're gonna uncover like someone's album collection from a estate sale or whatever. But like maybe in a place like Austin, it's it's so overground. Everything's so overground.
Everything's a hunt here in Bisbee. It's kind of fun. You have some of the junk collectors and they come and there are some of the thrift stores and consignment shops and stuff.
All that's really fun. I just don't experience as much of that culture in a insanely gentrified Austin or
How long have you been in Austin?
Back in the day. Well, I've been in and out, but I got here in I got here in '88, I think.
Okay, so I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes there.
Oh my God, it's like not the same. I mean, if you didn't have like certain kind of geographical markers, you wouldn't even. That was the same place. But
it's still such a great music city.
Yeah. Have you come here?
I have.
For South by or other times?
No, I think I was just hitchhiking.
Oh. Who does that?
I was excited to talk to you because really any documentation of that birth of punk rock and that time period, the late 70s, is so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And so I love talking about it, and maybe we can get into some stories from San Francisco. But I grew up with punk rock as my roots.
Yeah.
But at a time where you could Google, what is punk rock? What are boots and braces? Or what have you? So I kind of felt like it wasn't authentic. It was almost like the Colonial Williamsburg. Replicating something that was once having
I do
a
think
pulse.
the thing about punk rock is, I don't know, I think I met some this is tangential, but I met these like green haired girls last time I was on tour, young girls in the El Paso scene. It was like a really small scene, and I thought, I think they're experiencing pretty much what I experienced, because they have their subculture and they have their community, and it's probably at odds with the overground community. I think the only difference is like a lot less people would be like, "Hey, Greenie," like.
So they don't have the same kind of fight, the same kind of struggle, or
no, I don't think you have the same struggle with the outside world as much. But I think that little sense of community. That kind of grassroots community, I think that's probably still there. I can't really speak very accurately about that because I'm not in that community. I'm old, but I think that probably people go into that scene for some of the same reasons, but they just don't have as much of a confrontational experience with the general culture. It was like, I would dye my hair just blonde and people would scream at me, "Hey, blondie," and I'd get and it was worse when it was blue and pink. And
that's definitely changed. I do remember when I got into it early. In my first band, I was 13 actually. We were called the Oi Skunks.
Okay.
Back before I even really knew what oi meant,
Okay.
And I guess we never really had people screaming out at us, but I remember my brother used to shave the sides of my head with a razor, so I could get the full effect of the mohawk, and I would have razor burn cuts all over my head. So kids would taunt me on the bus.
Yeah.
So I felt it a little bit.
I was already taunted before punk rock, so it's like, bring it.
and that's that's, I mean, talking about the camaraderie of the scene and that.
Yeah.
It is a place. This at least was my experience. It was a place where I could fit in, right?
Yeah, I think that was everything, and I think I wish that I kind of expressed that better on my album and even better in my show, because that was really, to me, that's sort of the big thing. That you could remake your family.
Right.
And I do talk about that a little bit. To me, you could remake your family. Everybody accepted you. You could be very flawed. They could be very flawed. I think what's interesting now is, as an older person, I think we all get like busy and intolerant, and we're not very accepting of one another. And in a larger culture wars, lens, we're not accepting of one another at all anymore. But I think on that sort of ground floor punk rock experience, you could be any way, and you had a lot of friends and kind of supported and held each other up, and each person was sort of, I felt this with the 80s scene too, which wasn't a punk rock scene, and I felt it even through the 90s. You could sort of be, it was kind of like a galaxy where you could be the happening planet for a minute, and people could rotate around you, but then you were interested in the other planets in the constellation, the other stars, and you'd rotate around them. So I love that. I
feel like you really do touch on that on the album. And I mean, you mentioned those early gigs, all sorts of people that you wouldn't see normally, like, transgendered people. Being open,
very active in the punk rock scene,
right? And that's so fascinating, because you fast forward, what, decades, 40 years later, and we're still talking about it in the news, and it's still we're only now really, I don't know, it seems like in the past decade or so
we've made a lot of progress, but in the past year and a half, it seems to be backtracking.
Right, but I mean,
maybe it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
But at least now. And it's
a conversation.
It's a conversation, and people are feeling more comfortable being open with it.
Right.
But I imagine back in the 70s, people who identify that way were probably so grateful to have this community that started to emerge.
I had gratitude, because I didn't relate to those like football players in high school. I can't speak for the trans people on the scene. I just think, I don't know. I think people like to hang out. I think people like to be accepted. I think people like to kind of push against what we thought was like a dinosaur corporate culture then, but what were we thinking? It was like nothing. It was just a long guitar solo, a long drum solo.
Right.
But
get back to basics. Right?
Yeah. But San Francisco is full of all kinds of people, and this was probably a microcosm of some of San Francisco's society. It was only kind of later where, in the 80s, and it's been talked about a lot, where the punk rock got more homogeneous and more male and probably more white. I don't know, definitely more male. I don't know how that even happened. Wasn't there like this a female player in Black Flag? I don't know how it was. It got to be just like this testosterone fest of, built white guys with their shirts off. I don't know.
Well, you make reference to the Go-Go's. What's your, because in all girl bands, you kind of, riff on the melody of We Got the Beat. And, watching, I think it was, Behind the Music or something like that. I know that they had pretty punk rock roots on the West Coast.
I saw them when they were a punk rock band. I never saw them when they got big. I saw them before Kathy Valentine, when Margot was their bass player. It's sort of a blur seeing them, but I do remember seeing Belinda, I think at a Germs concert, wearing a fur coat. I remember that really stuck out because it was like, man, the LA scene is really different than the San Francisco scene.
Yeah.
I used to have a line about that in my show, but it seemed a little, I don't know if it was mean-spirited or I don't know. It stuck in my mind. And I'm pretty sure I saw the Germs too, but a lot of that LA stuff is really a blur. I know I saw the Weirdos a lot of times, but I went over. A lot of people lived at the Canterbury Hotel. Have you read any of these oral histories that are out, or Alice Bagg's book? Or a lot of people lived at this cool rundown hotel, the Canterbury. I knew some people that lived there, and so many different punks lived there. If you went over to visit your friend, you ended up in other people's apartments. So I have memories of being in Jane's apartment, but I don't know that we were more than acquaintances. And Charlotte, I never really knew, but, like on my album, it says I got my drum lesson from DJ Bonebreak, but he wasn't in Exon. He was in a band with Charlotte called The Eyes. And they used to practice at the Mask, and I slept over. Sometimes if I didn't have a place to stay, I'd sleep at the Mask. So I think I got up and it was like their practice time. And then I walked up to DJ and I was like, hey, I want to learn drums. Will you give me a lesson? He's like the nicest guy in the world. So he did. So yeah, I don't have a lot of go-go stories. I did know Margot a little bit when she moved to New York, because she lived or hung out in the East Village during the time of my band Pulse Salama. So I would see her around. I don't know if I have answers to those questions. It was definitely surprising that band blew up so big, but I'm glad they did.
Well, I have to admit, I loved the first couple of albums. Yeah. In the early 80s of the Go-Go's.
They're catchy songs.
And they were breaking grounds. They didn't keep their sounds. But I remember.
Break ground because you're an all-female band.
Every single member.
And they weren't put together. I love the Runaways, but they're a put-together band.
Right.
They're sort of like the Monkees. And then a put-together band could take on its own life. Pulse Salama was a put-together band too by Ann, and then all of a sudden you start writing songs and playing and going places, and you're not a put-together band anymore. But they weren't. They were a total do-it-yourself band.
Yeah. So, I still give them a lot of credit.
Yeah.
And those are catchy pop songs. They really were.
They're very catchy. In the 80s, I didn't really like catchy pop songs, but something must have changed, because I can't seem to hardly write songs that aren't that kind of song anymore. But the culture doesn't want those kind of songs anymore, I don't think.
What does the culture want? Yeah. I don't even know anymore.
I don't know. It's very fragmented, and
it is. That's a great word for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the overground experience, I guess, is hip hop and this kind of pop that I will definitely hum to, but I'm not. I'm impressed with the craftsmanship of it, but
right.
The pop is to me it's like on the level of a conglomerate. You know what I mean?
It's well polished. You can appreciate it on that level.
It's like the AT&T of pop. It's like the Go-Go's if the Go-Go's were made by Verizon, or something. You know what I mean?
Yep. Verizon presents. Yep. The Go-Go's.
Well, I'm sure Verizon does present the Go-Go's, but I just mean if Verizon made the music, it would be, Portugal the Man, and I'll sing that song. It's a great song, or Pharrell, or whatever. And those are some of the better ones. But I liked hip hop too, but I'm old, so I liked what seemed to be pretty. When hip hop came downtown from the Bronx to New York, I used to go to the Roxy and go to lots of shows, and I love those bands. But I could relate to them because they're in my city, and met people, and it was a thing that was sort of breaking.
Right. It must have been exciting. Yeah.
But I would like to relate to Jay-Z. I would love to relate to Beyonce, because all kinds of people love Beyonce, and she's really become this feminist icon. I want to like the music. I don't like it very much.
Well, it's good that, just be able to appreciate her and what she's doing.
I like her power in the world. And I love that she could go on stage almost like Wonder Woman in a little, like leotard shaped thing, and with like big, strong legs. And she can be a sex symbol and a moneymaker. We don't all have to have this one body type. And she is like revered. So I like her place in the world. I tried to watch the Coachella thing and hope I would convert, but I.
Oh, I'm so out of the loop. I don't even know what you're talking about.
She played at Coachella like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and it's like all over the news media. So I watched some of the YouTube. It's very big. It's all very big.
Mm-hmm. What did she do exactly? Was it was she protesting anything?
No, no. She just did a set, but it was like the biggest act that they've ever had at Coachella was Beyonce. Okay. She just pulled out all the stops of showmanship. This is a big glossy show, but people were super impressed with it, and she brought out her sister and sang with her, and then she brought out her old band, Destiny's Child, sang with them. It's very, very, very showbiz. But yeah, she has a strain of activism in that music. I think I'm too old. I know I keep saying that.
But I imagine that's why you appreciate her. She's standing for something.
Right. Yeah. And I also like it just as in a body way, because we're all supposed to be this one kind of sexy, as women, you're supposed to be this one kind of body. And, I do think she's selling sex, but she's selling sex like completely on her own.
Yeah, terms. But she's owning it. Exactly. And
she's owning it.
Right.
She's owning it and broadening, I don't know the right way to say it, but, making it so that a broader type of female, and I'm talking about body, I'm not talking about race, can be perceived as hot,
Right.
And we're all supposed to be so skinny, and I'm definitely not. So to be playing music, to bring it back to me,
yes.
To be playing music at 58, chunky, you're like, that's pretty punk rock. That's breaking a lot of stereotypes, because no one really wants to see a chunky 58-year-old, play any music. I don't know. You could go see this chunky men sometimes, these folk singers, and nobody has
and
a
that's
problem
okay.
with it. But I think there's a double standard. I really do.
Well, you don't censor yourself, or I'm thinking of the song "Blue Haired Boy."
Yeah.
And what's been also talked about a lot recently is what are women supposed to talk about with sex, and it seems like the whole song's about a one night stand, right?
Yeah.
And I love this line that you have in there. Can you fall in love for just one night? And I'm wondering, are you asking? Are you asking the listener? Do you have an answer, or is it rhetorical? Or what?
I think I just did that all the time. Fell in love for one night. I really, really think I did that. And then when I did my performance piece, I rented this little theater, and the guy that runs the theater was really nice, and he said he'd watch the piece, and he gave me some notes. He only gave me 3 notes, and one of them was to put some space between "Can you fall in love for just one night?" And then he said, "Put a space there. I think you can." And then he said, "Put an even longer space." I think that's why I did it so many times. So it's a joke, but it's the truth.
Well, it was...
and I felt it. I don't know. I don't really... My perception is that men don't really fall in love for just one night, but because it's more about physicality and physical sensation. But I think women can totally be about physicality and physical sensation, and that sometimes we're represented that we can't be that way. But at least in my own head, I always had a lot of romance around these hookups.
No, it's beautiful, and
wanted more, and really built it up,
my experiences.
I mean, I remember that hookup from 40 years. It obviously had some romantic shape to me.
Was that so memorable because it was? I mean, a punk rock. I mean, you go into describing what he looked like.
It was memorable because I really hadn't seen a boy with blue hair before.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, and then it was also memorable because there was an open room across from where we were partying. It was unlocked. It was empty. And so we went into that room, and then the little part of me that's a good girl is like, well, that was kind of bad. I think I'll just rent this room and move into it, because I was living at my parents' at that point. I was kind of in and out. And then that particular place became a little bit like the Canterbury, not as hardcore, that place I was telling you in L.A., and not as run down, but lots of punks ended up moving in there. So these girls, Janie and Jerry. Janie was the girlfriend of Will Shatter from Negative Trend and later Flipper. They were there first, and then I moved across the hall, and then I don't remember who else came. I know my friend Julie, I think, moved in there. And I think other punks moved in there. So it was also memorable because I ended up living in that room for I don't know how long. I really don't remember. And other people would stay in that room, like I don't know how much you know about like obscure California scene, but there was a band called F Word.
F Word.
So Rick Elrick was the front guy of F Word. He really rejected shoes. He was barefoot as much as possible. That was like his shtick. And then he had this manager, Posh Boy, who I think he's put out other people, records for people. I don't remember what records. I think he's put out some records that were big, some punk rock records, but I don't remember. But like my room was so tiny. And like Posh Boy and Rick Elrick slept on the floor, I had like a single bed, and then about the amount of space it was a single bed, and they both slept down there. So I guess I remember it because he had blue hair, and I never seen, and he was real pretty. I remember it because I moved into the room. I remember it because, like I say, well, I don't know if I say it on the album or just in the show, but he, the blue haired boy had a girlfriend and went back to the suburb he lived in, and then, and that it was over. So I guess I remember the excitement and the letdown and the moving into the room.
Okay.
So. And
there was something there. There's something that maybe not the same as if you were to establish a relationship with someone, but.
Right. There's something there. There's something. I always felt like there was, not always, but I often or usually felt like there was something there, and like you got a little kind of high, like when you kind of got, just like you would get with somebody that maybe you end up like, living with, when you first meet them. There's like a lot of fairy dust and a lot of excitement and adrenaline, and I always liked that. And
well, you get that high now. I mean, it's like a one-click hookup.
Now,
I'm
really curious about that.
Well,
I'm curious about that, but I'm never gonna know or experience that. And I'm actually really thankful because I was so impulsive. I would be like swiping all the time, and then I would be like so devastated the next day.
Right?
It's just, it's totally hookup. But I'm so curious about that. I wish I could just be like a fly on the wall in that interaction, not out of like some kind of pervy voyeurism. Like I'm like really
that actually,
curious, like culturally, societally, like what does that fucking look like, man?
Well, I don't think it's the same anymore. There's an excitement.
Thin, it seems a little thin. You don't even get to kind of discover who they are first before you hook up.
Right.
It's just.
It seems like a lot of the excitement comes from just the pictures, the clicking, the little red dot that, appears on your, mail message.
It would have broke my heart. I mean, I think I would do it because I'm so impulsive, but I think it would break my heart because you're just screening for like, if you're a dude, you're just screening for like a pretty face and a body type. And so like, that's just not cool. I don't think it's cool. And also, like, I really lived through the ravages of the 80s AIDS epidemic, lost lots of friends. So to me, this is like really a weird development that, there was, I was cool with all this promiscuity, but it did exacerbate an epidemic.
Right.
and then now we are kind of back to promiscuity, but in this very private, technological, social media way.
Mm-hmm.
I can't relate to it, but I'm really intrigued by it.
Well, we're reaching the point where even HIV is
coming back a little bit.
Well, it is. I was in Atlanta, and I have some gay friends there, and I mean, I learned it is an epidemic in places like Atlanta, but it's interesting because it's manageable now. People aren't dying in droves.
There's good meds.
Yeah. I mean, you'll have to take a pill every day for the rest of your life, but it's manageable.
Yes.
So,
yes,
I mean, that's the big one now.
Take the pill every day.
That is even manageable.
And at least the pill is affordable now.
Yeah. So anything that you can catch now is, either treatable or manageable. I don't know how that's changing things. It's crazy to think about syphilis, for example. I mean, they used to just kill everybody.
We're talking about syphilis.
But now you just get, some injections in your butt of, some sort of antibiotic. Yep. But
you're right. You don't die of madness like in Dickensian times or pre-Dickensian times, Roman times.
But so we've been talking for almost an hour, which is great.
And you probably only want 15 minutes of this.
No. I mean, the whole intention of this show, long form interviews, really picking at your brain. And back to the album, it really is a nostalgia album, and it's great. Are there any other tracks that are linked to any great stories from that time?
Well, certainly Winter of Hate. I don't know if it's like, I don't know if there's like a short little, let me tell you about, that day. But
well, it was not the Summer of Love. You make that clear.
Not the Summer of Love. I mean, the thing about that whole little 48 hours of when the Sex Pistols came to town, I know that I went to the Miyako Hotel because I heard that they were staying there, and I was hoping to like spy a Sex Pistol with my little eye. I don't think I did, but I ran into this guy, Brendan, who ran the Mask in LA, and we decided we would meet up later at the show. At the show, I remember thinking the show was awful and horribly disappointing, crushingly disappointing.
Oh, no.
And even if you know that Lydon is, and you love him for being sarcastic and nasty when he's in your city, being sarcastic and nasty to you, I don't know. The tone is different,
Right.
He said, do you ever get the feeling you've been cheated? You ever get the feeling you've been cheated? I was like, fuck that. I know.
So that was his commentary on what? Just the whole city of San Francisco? Or what?
What? Do you ever get the feeling you've been cheated? I think is about the show.
Okay.
The show. And then they broke up right after the show. They were hating each other. Malcolm McLaren had booked them into like little roadhouses in Texas and Oklahoma, and Atlanta in the South. He was trying to make it awful and controversial and confrontational, and he succeeded. And then, I guess, Sid had been like best friends with John, but he'd been a totally different guy before he became a heroin addict and started hanging out with Nancy Spungen. So you had this like guy that used to be your best friend and now is just like wasted all the time and playing terribly. And not that we all cared about playing that well, but if you're a band and you have songs, you do want to play the songs and the parts. So I think they're all like hating on each other. And it was also sort of like a Monkees put together band. So it wasn't like they totally formed because they were all friends. You know, Paul and Steve were friends, and John and Sid were friends. But I don't think they had a lot of love between those two factions. And then they played this venue where I went to see Boston, you know, where I went to see like offshoots of the Grateful Dead, where I went to see Heart. And that really wasn't like a punk rock venue. You know, I guess they just needed a payday after all those little crappy shows. So they booked this one show with Bill Graham, and just everything was wrong about it.
And what year was that? 78?
78.
The U.S. tour?
Yeah. And the Nuns opened and the Avengers opened, and I asked them, you know, what was that like? I didn't go backstage, and they said they were treated nastily. In my show, I say, you know, I'm sure they treated Foghat with great reverence, you know, respect. And Malcolm supposedly, I've read, you know, asked like, what was the worst punk band in San Francisco, and that he was going to have them go on after the Sex Pistols. So he booked this band Negative Trend that my roommate Will Shatter was in. The guy I said went on to being Flipper and lived across the hall in the Oz, but they didn't even end up getting to play. And then there was like, I don't know, I went to an after party, but I didn't go after. I went like the next day, and it was raging, and Sid was at the party, and he was like hooking up with all these girls in the closet. And, yeah, I talk about it in my show. You have to get someone to book my show into Bisbee. I come back.
Well, that's a great way to end this interview, that kind of, you know, on a teaser.
Yeah.
But I feel like we could talk all day, and maybe we can get you into the studio face-to-face at some point, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you this weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you have to plug when this comes out on podcast? We'll have links to your material, but what can you tell everybody?
I have a website, SadieSaturdayNight.com.
And that's
By the time someone goes to it,
right?
It might be renamed GeneCaffeine.com.
Okay.
I have that too, but GeneCaffeine.com has nothing current on it. It just has, it's cool looking, but it's got a bunch of old stuff, and I lost the password. I can't figure out how to update it. But
that's
go
a
there
problem.
anyways. And you can go to Bandcamp. On Bandcamp, I have 3 albums. I guess that's what you've heard. I have other stuff. I have more albums on iTunes and stuff.
Spotify.
Spotify, I hate, but everybody goes to it.
That's what I use.
So I'm all over Spotify. Get me my 3 cents. Listen to those songs a lot of times, so I get my 3 cents.
So that's how it works. Every time someone listens to a track, you get 3 cents. Oh, that's great.
It's not great. It's not great.
Well, I mean, it's better than nothing.
Buy things and you'd get 90 cents.
Right.
You know, but 3 cents sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not great, but you can't beat them. You got to join them. So you can totally go to Spotify. You can buy the album from me on Bandcamp. The album isn't at very many record stores. I didn't do a good job at all of trying to get it distributed. I tried with a couple places.
But you're out there. People can find it.
Yeah, people can find it. And I don't know how soon you're doing this podcast, but, you know, I am doing this little tour to California. Mm-hmm. So you could...
what are some of the cities that you'll be in?
I have little shows in LA, San Diego, Sacramento.
Perfect.
San Francisco.
Okay.
I have got a little one coming up in Dallas.
Thank you so much, Gene.
Yeah.
And
it was fun. I hope I didn't shortchange you on the punk rock stories.
No, it was great.
Well, there you have it. She definitely did share some great stories, and you can hear more if you go see her live. The album, Sadie Saturday Night, also has some great spoken word tracks that really help push a narrative forward. It's fun to listen to, and also go back and listen to her earlier releases like Geckos in the Elevator. Good stuff. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a thing. And also send me an email, bisbeelive@gmail.com, and remember to treat others the way you would want to be treated, all right?